Hi, and welcome to In Search of Insight, Nootropics Depot's monthly podcast. I'm your podcast host, Erica, and sitting next to me, as always, is our product specialist at Nootropics Depot, Emil.
Hey, everyone.
Thank you to everybody who tuned in to our 50th podcast episode. That was last month's episode, so if you haven't checked that one out, it's quite long, but very informative because Emil and I talked about the top 50 supplements from 2025, just from the last year. So if you're curious about adding some new supplements to your stack, or you want to know what the top 5 or top 10 best sellers were from 2025, definitely check out that podcast. But today we are talking about something exciting and perfect for this cold winter season. We're talking about our new supplement, Cyatherm, which is a thermogenic.
So what that means is that it helps you to burn fat. And as you're burning something, just like with any fuel, like if you have a lighter and there's some butane in there and you spark it and you light your lighter, there's heat coming off of it. And the same is true for if we're burning fat within our bodies that generates heat. And actually, thermogenesis is one of the ways in which we regulate our body heat. So it's really an important process, but we can tweak that process a little bit to get it to go into overdrive. And by doing that, we create more heat. But because we're creating more heat, that means something is being burnt, and that something is oftentimes fat. As we'll talk about, it also extends to glucose, which is also important, especially because glucose eventually can get stored as fat as well. So there's some really interesting stuff going on with Cyatherm, and we're definitely going to get into all of the nitty-gritty details, and we're going to take some. Part of the reason for that is there are some stimulating and mood-boosting ingredients in Cyatherm, and the thermogenic effects kick in pretty good and quick. So if we take this right now, within about half an hour, you'll probably see a little bit more of an energetic demeanor to us, and maybe we'll report that we're a little bit warmer. It is getting quite a bit colder here. It is a bit colder where we normally record. So let's see if by the end of this podcast, I'm dripping a few beads of sweat. And same for Erica.
Yeah.
So without further ado, let's take some so it has
Okay.
some time to kick in.
What is the dose of
The
Cyatherm?
dose is 2 capsules.
Okay.
Which, good to know, if the effect of 2 capsules is too strong for you, you can always drop down to just 1 capsule. Stretch your stash a little bit further, but as you'll come to realize throughout this podcast, the dosages and the formulation is very meticulously designed, so ideally you would be taking 2. It's really not an overwhelming effect, so I would just suggest sticking to the 2 capsule dose.
Awesome.
There you go.
Okay. I'm really curious. I think we've tried this once or twice before, a few months back, right?
I've tried it a bunch of times.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if you've ever tried it.
I think I may have tried it once.
During the beta testing.
Yeah, during the beta testing, but I haven't tried it since then, so this is going to be an interesting experience.
Yeah, and we
Yeah.
did a lot of beta testing on this one, so I can tell some stories about that too. Here we go. Full dose of Cyatherm. Cheers.
Okay, so let's get started with the most obvious element of this product, which is the fact that it's going to be helping us burn fat.
Yes.
And how exactly does that work? I'm sure that this is a bit of a difficult question, but let's just get straight into that
Yes.
important element.
We're going to spend the whole podcast on that.
Okay.
Because there is a lot of intricacy, and the way in which we did the formulation, there's a lot of different angles that we're attacking. But one thing that is really at the core of thermogenesis is brown adipose tissue. Another name for this is brown fat. So you have white adipose tissue, white fat. That's kind of the fat that we don't want. It's the fat that accumulates. It's the fat that makes us look bigger and fatter. It has some important functions too, of course. So white fat is a storage for energy in the form of fat or triglycerides. And another thing it does, it acts kind of like a jacket. It's a insulating layer. So white adipose tissue also keeps us warm, and it's a nice cushioning for our organs. But we have kind of gone very far away from our natural programming, and we are intaking way too many calories and not expending enough calories in general. That's why...
And by natural programming, you're referring to like early humans or kind of cavemen style, where we're eating things that we have to hunt.
Right.
And we're gathering berries and vegetables.
Yep.
So just to give you guys a little perspective of what you mean when you say our original programming.
Exactly. So, like Erica is saying, not eating that much food, eating a wide variety of food, not eating like large amounts of fat or large amounts of carbohydrates in the form of sugars.
And no processed food.
No processed foods, just basically going out there, and with that in mind, going out there. You have to go, you have to walk, you have to
climb,
run,
hide,
hunt
wait.
an animal,
Yeah.
things that make you expend calories. Now, some people don't even go to the grocery store anymore. You just go on your phone, on Amazon or whatever service you use for this, and you just order your groceries. You never have to get off of the couch. Sometimes you don't even have to cook. I mean, standing there and cooking, that expends some energy too, but a lot of us have gotten so lazy that we're just ordering in food, not exercising, sitting on the couch, and surprise, surprise, about 70% of the US is overweight, and a big portion of that 70% is also obese. I believe it's around 30%. That's quite shocking. So it means that something is really going wrong, and that thing that's going wrong is that we're intaking too many calories, and because of that we are getting more white adipose tissue. And if you have a lot of white adipose tissue and you have issues with insulin sensitivity, then what doesn't end up happening is that white adipose tissue eventually turns into brown adipose tissue, or the in-between stage, beige adipose tissue, which is basically a mix of white adipose tissue and brown adipose tissue, hence the name beige. Now, in brown adipose tissue, this is not a storage type of tissue. It is packed full of mitochondria. It's packed full of machinery that will take fuel, burn it, and produce energy and heat with it. And that is the main thing we're really going to be talking about. One, how can you take more of that white adipose tissue and turn it into brown adipose tissue and beige adipose tissue? And more importantly, perhaps, is how can we best activate that brown adipose tissue so that it is in a state of actually burning that fat. And again, when we're burning that fat, we're going to feel that as heat, and we are going to lose weight. Of course, this isn't just going to be a magic pill. If the scenario I was describing, you order your food and you just sit on the couch all day, you drive yourself to work, you don't get in your 10,000 steps minimum, that I think is kind of a minimum of physical
recommendation these days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's actually been lowered a bit, but I don't really agree with that. I think you should be moving, whether it is doing 10,000 steps, going on a bike ride, going to the gym. The human body craves physical exercise, and that physical exercise also triggers the uptake of glucose into muscles to be used, to be turned into energy. Fat is being liberated and being burned, and then with this brown adipose tissue, you get more and more burning of this fat. You're going to look leaner, more muscular. You're just going to be able to use your body basically to its full potential.
Okay, I have a question about the brown adipose tissue. Do you know where that brown adipose tissue is located on our body? Like, are there specific areas where we find more of that versus white adipose tissue?
Yeah, that's a good question. You see brown adipose tissue all over your body. Unfortunately, the areas where you have the least amount of brown adipose tissue is in that visceral fat, so just around your stomach. So what people tend to call stubborn fat. It is genuinely harder to get rid of. So one thing to just get out of the way here is you don't want to get there. Again, this is not a magic pill, but if you're eating well, you're exercising well, and you want to just increase how lean you look, you want to increase just overall fat burning, you want to show off your muscle a little bit more, then this is a really good product. If you're expecting this to make you lose 20, 30 pounds of weight with minimal intervention, lifestyle-wise, it's not going to work. It will help in your efforts. But anyways, just to answer your question, brown adipose tissue is all throughout your body.
Okay.
Which is important because your whole body needs to be warmed up, and it is one of the ways in which we regulate heat. And that is one reason why Erica was saying it's a fun product to take in the winter, actually. You would really consider something like Cyatherm to be popular more in the summer months when people are coming out of the winter and they want to get leaner. Well, you could also just take Cyatherm during the winter, and it's going to have two effects. One, you can eat a little bit more. I mean, that's going to happen. And not all of that is going to be stored as fat during the holidays and whatever. I like to eat a little bit more during the winter too. I like putting on a bit more weight. It keeps me warmer. But I don't want to put on so much weight during the winter that in the summer, when I want to go out to the beach and go swimming, that I'm insecure about how I look. I just want to look right as the temperature is good. I want to look nice and lean, go out there, do a bunch of swimming, physical exercise, go to a festival, take my shirt off if it gets too warm. You know the drill. So then taking a thermogenic during the winter is going to allow you to pack on a little bit more lean mass, to stay a little bit leaner, to ensure that you have a lot of brown adipose tissue. But the second benefit, which is maybe my favorite, is that if you have more brown adipose tissue during the winter, you will stay warmer. And a really interesting thing that we'll talk about a little bit later too, is that one of the triggers for activating and actually converting white adipose tissue to brown adipose tissue is cold exposure. Cold exposure increases norepinephrine and epinephrine levels, and norepinephrine and epinephrine activate beta-adrenergic receptors, specifically the beta-3 adrenergic receptor that is highly expressed in brown adipose tissue. And when those receptors are activated, those brown adipose tissue, the BAT is another name for it, by the way, the BAT becomes activated and starts burning fat and keeps you warm. Very nice effect. I've been taking this for the last week or so, and it's been keeping me a little bit warmer because it's been really cold in the Netherlands all of a sudden. And actually, one of the reasons why we haven't taken it much yet is because we came out with it during the summer, and it was a very warm summer. We don't have air conditioning here, and taking a very strong thermogenic is a little bit uncomfortable in that kind of situation because you will just generally be hotter. So it's better in the summer not to take something that is a very strong thermogenic, unless you really want to get super lean. Then you're just going to have to deal with sweating. And a really funny story, actually, when we were developing Cyatherm, Paul took it a few times during the summer, and at one point he took his son to the Children's Museum in Phoenix, and he took Cyatherm. And then I believe he took maybe ephedrine or another kind of adrenergic stimulant. And he said he was like really quite embarrassed because he was sweating a lot. He was just completely drenched in sweat because the thermogenic effect was so strong. That's also when we knew we were onto something with Cyatherm, of course. But it just kind of puts it into perspective, especially in Phoenix where it's really warm. That was a little bit too much. We'll also talk a little bit more later about how you can actually maximize the thermogenic effects of Cyatherm a little bit more by adding a stimulant to the mix. There is a stimulant in here already, rauwolsine. However, we didn't want to make it very, very stimulating because that can be quite uncomfortable for a lot of people, but we wanted to have the right amount of adrenergic stimulation to activate the brown adipose tissue. So.
Okay. Before we get into the ingredients, because I am curious to go through that, I do want to check in here at the beginning to ask, how long would it take taking Cyatherm to notice results in terms of fat burning?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think in the first week or two, you're really going to notice the thermogenic effects. But I think more important, especially if you're just starting out, you haven't taken many thermogenic type supplements, is the process of turning that white adipose tissue into brown adipose tissue, and that just takes some time. It can take many weeks, maybe up to a month or two, just to basically restructure your metabolic programming so that you become, I wanted to say more efficient, but the trick here is actually that we're trying to make our bodies less efficient. We are trying to make them expend more calories, more energy in the form of burnt calories, which then keeps us thinner. It's the main issue with gaining weight is just excess calories that are not being used. And so the whole concept here is energy expenditure increasing. So that's one part of it. It needs some time to really build up, to restructure everything. And then, of course, fat loss isn't a very rapid process. I think that's something that annoys a lot of people. I've seen this in my personal life a lot. People will go on a diet, they'll follow it for 2 weeks, they see minimal results, they stop, and they gain the maybe 1 or 2 pounds that they lost in this 2-week period. They gain it back. Sometimes they gain even more weight back. So one thing that's really important to know about fat loss, weight loss in general, it's a long process. You want it to take a long time. Otherwise, you run into this thing that Erica was telling me about the other day, Ozempic face, right?
Well, yeah, we were chatting about it a little bit.
Yeah. So people on Ozempic are losing weight so quickly that their skin is just like, it's still enough skin to support all of that fat weight in your face, but now the fat isn't there, so now you just have this droopy, kind of flabby face that looks a lot more aged. So anyways, ideally you want to gradually lose weight. That is something like Cyatherm is going to do that if you exercise with it and eat well with it. Again, it's not a magic bullet. It will enhance fat loss, weight loss in the context of a healthy diet and a healthy exercise regime. So really keep that in mind. And I would say then, if you really want to see significant results, you've decreased your caloric intake by a little bit. It doesn't really have to even be that much. Even if you reduce it by 100 calories, maybe 200 calories, that could be enough for long-term slow weight loss. So to put that in context, I know a lot of my colleagues, they put a little bit of creamer in their coffee. Every time you put a little bit of creamer in your coffee, that's probably 30, 40 calories. So if you have 2 or 3 coffees in a day and you're adding creamer to each one, then that's about 100, 150 calories. If you just don't put creamer in your coffee, that's maybe all you need. So weight loss is also simple in the fact that very small changes can have big effects if you give it time. So anyways, good diet, good exercise, Cyatherm, you're gonna see good results in maybe 2 months.
Okay, nice. I think that's a pretty solid answer, and it's also really honest. Obviously, we're not going to spend the whole podcast talking about weight loss techniques because the podcast is really about this product, but that's a good kind of general benchmark to have. And it's also honest in the sense that, yeah, if you're trying to lose weight and you're exercising, that's a pretty normal amount of time that you would expect to be able to see results in 2 months. Yeah. Okay, so now
I would love to be able to say, hey, everyone, like all of the what was it, the Muscle Tech products, Hydroxycut, like all of the Hydroxycut ads from back in the day, like, take this for 5 days or you're gonna lose 15 pounds. Like, that's not reality, man. This is not how this is gonna work. But you will be able to lose some weight, but you're gonna have to put in the work. This is just going to help you along.
Yeah. Okay. And since you did mention Ozempic and Ozempic face before, I'm really curious to talk about the ingredients of this product because now that Ozempic is on the market and very, 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 very popular, I think people are also interested in fat burning supplements, and that's really just on everybody's mind. That's in the news a lot. So I'm curious to learn about what's in this product because yeah, we don't really have the ability to look into Ozempic and know exactly what the ingredients are. It's a pharmaceutical.
Well, it is one compound. It is a peptide. And it's a GLP-1 agonist. And we've talked about this in our Berberine podcast. So with Ozempic, it's not so much a fat burner as it is like a glucose, insulin kind of appetite thing.
Okay.
If you want something that hits GLP-1, Berberine is the one to go for. Cyatherm, not so much.
You bring up an interesting point
but
about
you can stack them.
Okay. Cyatherm and berberine. You mean? Yeah.
That would actually be a really good stack.
Mm-hmm. You bring up an interesting point about appetite. Does Cyatherm have any effects on appetite, do you think?
Also not really.
Okay.
Like, it might be a little bit appetite suppressing due to one of the stimulants that's in there, rauwolsine. I will say maybe I have been a little bit less hungry the last couple of days that I started adding this to my stack. So, yeah, maybe. But berberine is really more of the appetite suppressing one.
Okay.
Which is great because they are synergistic. So if you really want to up your weight loss and decrease your appetite and really kind of throw everything at it that you can, then a combination of berberine and Cyatherm are going to be really good. One thing I also wanted to quickly say with how long it takes for this to kick in, I just re-remembered it, is Erica and I have been taking 2 of the ingredients that are in Cyatherm. Cyanidin 3-glucoside, C3G, and black ginger. We've been taking those for cyanidin 3-glucoside probably for 2-3 years.
Yeah.
And then black ginger for maybe 2 years at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I think we released it about 2 years ago, and we've been taking it since release. And I will say that I have definitely gotten comments from Erica, from my mom, from some other people that I definitely look leaner. I'm exercising about the same amount. I'm eating about the same amount, which is good. I'm exercising quite a lot. I'm eating quite healthy in general. So I already have a really good baseline. And then when I added in cyanidin 3-glucoside and black ginger, it's just been keeping me leaner, which is really nice. And so that's something you can expect with Cyatherm as well. So maybe we can get into the ingredients now.
Yeah.
It's kind of in the name already. Cyatherm. And this whole stack was built around cyanidin 3-glucoside. Hence, Cya. And then we wanted to enhance the thermogenic effects of cyanidin 3-glucoside, so Cyatherm. Thermogenic.
It also makes sense that it's a bit stimulating because cyanidin 3-glucoside is, just as a standalone, quite stimulating.
Yeah.
And then black ginger is also in it as well,
Which
right?
is also stimulating.
Also stimulating. And then there was the other one that you were mentioning.
Rauwolsine.
Yes. Okay, this one's new to me. What is this?
So, rauwolsine is related to yohimbine. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah, you've talked about it before.
Yeah. So, there's a bark, the yohimbe bark. And in the yohimbe bark, you have mostly yohimbine, a little bit of rauwolsine, which I believe is also called alpha yohimbine. Yohimbine is very good at increasing norepinephrine and epinephrine release. And because of that, it can have fat burning effects. It can also have libido enhancing effects. So it's a very popular one in kind of the weight loss and libido areas, and also a bit for energy. And you see it in some pre-workouts as well, because it does act as quite a good stimulant, kind of along the lines of something like ephedrine, which is really a shame that that is a compound we're not allowed to work with, because it's been banned. The plant that it's in has been banned. You can still get it over the counter, funnily enough, but of course now you have to sign for it, because you can also synthesize amphetamines from it, but that's a whole other issue. Yohimbine is somewhat similar in that sense. It is this adrenergic stimulant, but a lot of people find it to be kind of anxiogenic. It makes you feel a little bit too pumped up and a bit too stimulated in not necessarily a pleasant way. Rauwolsine has the distinct advantage that the effects seem to be much smoother for most people, a little bit longer lasting, so you don't have to take it as many times in a day, which also decreases the amount of side effects. So rauwolsine is basically a better form of yohimbine for a lot of people. The dose that we put in Cyatherm is very low. So usually you see people dosing it around 1 milligram to 3 milligrams. We decided to dose ours at 0.5 milligram, which is a very low dose. Part of the reason for that is because we don't want this to be crazy stimulating, and something like rauwolsine or yohimbine can be really crazy stimulating. I recommended to one of my friends that he try rawolsine, and I believe he took like 1 or 2 milligrams, and he wrote me back later in the day like, what the hell did you recommend me? I was so stimulated. I felt like I was on a really, really, really strong stimulant, and I totally wasn't ready for it or expecting it. So because of that, I was a little bit cautious with rawolsine. We wanted to go for a higher dose at first. We tried one of these higher doses. I didn't have that dramatic of an effect with it, nor did really anyone else at that milligram dose that we tried, but it was definitely much more overtly stimulating. So we dropped the dose down to 0.5 milligram, and at 0.5 milligram, I find especially for longer term daily use, which is where a product like Cyatherm is really going to shine, it works really well. Then, of course, if you want to, in a moment where you really want to up your thermogenic potential, maybe before going to the gym or something like that, maybe try and seek out a pre-workout that has some rawolsine in it. I think like maybe the Ghost pre-workout or something like that. They might still have rawolsine in it. So that way you're combining something like an extra dose of rawolsine with Cyatherm, and you have this metabolic restructuring, and then in the gym, of course, that is a thermogenic activity in and of itself, and then you have this thermogenic mix. That's really when you're probably going to see the most amount of fat loss. And then maybe even better, go for a cold swim after your workout or before your workout, and that increases norepinephrine a little bit more. But this is really for the people that are comfortable with adrenergic stimulation, which I can assure you, if you have never tried it, it is not everyone's cup of tea. I think, have you ever tried ephedrine?
Not that I know of.
I tried it a few times in the US. You also can't get it in the Netherlands over the counter, but when I was in the US, I was really curious. I'd heard about it, so I got myself some, and I had to sign for it, show my passport. Very strange. Again, because of the amphetamine manufacturing. In the form of Bronchate, and I took some, and I was just, I couldn't understand how people can take this stuff every day. It's really just pushy, physical, anxiety-ridden stimulation. So anyways, really high adrenergic stimulation, not super nice. Low amount of adrenergic stimulation is actually really nice. It's good for focus, it's good for mood, and it's good for thermogenesis. So that's one of the reasons why rawolsine is in here. And then, of course, when you're combining rawolsine with cyanidin 3-glucoside and black ginger, that stimulating effect is amplified, but also in a smooth way. So I really like how this came together. I think last night I took some before we went to the gym. That was really nice. It gave me a subtle boost. I felt like I was a little bit stronger in the gym, probably because a lot of the ingredients in here can also increase glucose uptake into your muscles and can liberate some of this fat to then burn as an energy source. So it felt quite nice as a pre-workout. And actually one of our colleagues during the beta testing, when she was taking it, she was saying to me like, hey, this really feels like a nice, smooth, low stimulant pre-workout. So it's a really nice one for that aspect as well. Okay, but let's get into some more of the ingredients. So
yes,
we have cyanidin 3-glucoside at a 500 milligram dose of the black rice extract, which is then yielding 125 milligrams of actual cyanidin 3-glucoside. Let me just double check that that's correct. Yep, that's correct. Another ingredient we have in there, as we already said, is black ginger. Black ginger is at a 50 milligram dose, a little bit lower than our standalone, but it blends in really nicely in the stack. And then we have piperine. Piperine helps enhance the bioavailability of cyanidin 3-glucoside, also seems to enhance the bioavailability of black ginger a little bit, one of the active ingredients in black ginger, which is 5,7-dimethoxyflavone. It seems to enhance the bioavailability of that compound. But what's also really cool about piperine is that it has its own thermogenic effects, so it too can increase brown adipose tissue activation. Then another ingredient we have in there is one of our patented ingredients from NNB. We were actually talking about NNB in the Top 50 podcast episode. I was saying that it's interesting to see that NNB just hit the market a year or two ago. They seem to be one of the big players now in the bodybuilding scene. A few years ago, that was Compound Solutions, who make Dynamine and T-Cream. And I think now it's kind of being taken over by NNB. And one or two even of their ingredients are in our top 50 already. And the one that is in Cyatherm is Chloroburn. This is a grains of paradise extract standardized for 6-paradol. 6-paradol increases the activation of brown adipose tissue, and it does this by activating the TRPV1 receptor, which is quite interesting because the TRPV1 receptor is the same receptor that capsaicin, the spicy component in chili peppers, activates. And this activation kind of sends out like a stress signal, and then you release norepinephrine. And because of that release of norepinephrine, brown adipose tissue ends up getting activated, and then you have thermogenesis. Another ingredient we have in here is chromium. Chromium is in there to increase insulin sensitivity, which goes really well with the insulin sensitivity enhancing effects of cyanidin 3-glucoside. Cyanidin 3-glucoside also increases the glucose type 4 transporter, GLUT4, which transports glucose primarily into muscles, which then your muscles can use. So cyanidin 3-glucoside has a very unique effect on overall insulin sensitivity and glucose processing, and chromium helps a lending hand there. So those go very nicely together. And then, this was a really nice addition in my opinion. We have some stimulating ingredients in there, as Erica was mentioning, and we were talking about rarewolsine, and can be a little bit edgy. We put in Ecklonia Cava. So we did an Ecklonia Cava podcast recently, and what is one of the main effects you noticed from the Ecklonia?
Well, it's very relaxing, but it's also good for muscle building.
Muscle building, it's good for hair growth, it's good for skin growth, but what we didn't realize is that Ecklonia Cava also enhances the conversion of white adipose tissue to brown adipose tissue, and also seems to be able to activate brown adipose tissue. But even more importantly is that it has GABAergic effects. So what Erica was saying, it's relaxing, and because of that relaxing activity, it's kind of acting like L-theanine and caffeine, where some people get a little bit edgy on caffeine, and then if you add in some L-theanine, the L-theanine smooths out the effects, but doesn't take away from the stimulation all too much. The same thing is going on here. The Ecklonia Cava is helping to balance out the rarewolsine, black ginger, and cyanidin 3-glucoside, so things don't get overstimulating. So the effect is very nice and smooth. And another interesting thing about actually Chloroburn, the grains of paradise extract, is that the active ingredient in there appears to inhibit fatty acid amide hydrolase, Fa. We've talked about this enzyme quite a lot, especially in the Black Maca episode we recently did. This is an enzyme that normally breaks down cannabinoids, endogenous cannabinoids, things like anandamide, 2-AG, palmitoyl ethanolamide, oleol ethanolamide. And if you then block the Fa enzyme, you can keep more of those endogenous cannabinoids around, which are also going to have a nice relaxing effect. And actually, interestingly enough, I'm just thinking of this now, a lot of the endocannabinoids and just cannabinoids in general also act on these TRPV type of receptors. So I actually need to look into if the Fa inhibition is having an effect on overall thermogenesis, because I haven't actually done that yet. But that, for one, is having a nice impact on the overall mood aspects of Cyatherm, which we'll touch on in a sec. And it's also just helping to smooth everything out. Am I missing any other ingredients? Piperine, black ginger, Chloroburn, Ecklonia Cava, black rice extract, and chromium. So that's all, and I'll actually go through if you want to hear some of the doses. We have 400 micrograms of chromium, and this chromium is coming from a pretty interesting formulation. It's being made by the same people that make Prima V Shilajit, and it's actually being stabilized with a little bit of Shilajit. So it's a very interesting form of chromium. Most chromium on the market is chromium picolinate. We really like this one, and it is called Chrominex 3+. So 400 micrograms, that is 1,143% of your daily value. Then we have the black rice extract, 500 milligrams of that, which, as I was saying earlier, yields us 125 milligrams of cyanidin 3-glucoside. Then we have Ecklonia Cava. This is yielding us 1.25 milligrams of diethyl. It's in here at 250 milligrams, and that is actually the full dose of Ecklonia Cava. So this is quite significant. Mm-hmm. This really makes this stack quite interesting, in my opinion. First of all, no one else on the market seems to actually have real Ecklonia Cava. That's a big problem, and I think even Consumer Labs recently touched on this, so that's quite interesting. But basically, as far as we are aware, we're the only ones with real Ecklonia Cava, so the fact that it is in a thermogenic product is super, super unique. And if you want to learn more about Ecklonia Cava, Erica can maybe put the Ecklonia Cava podcast somewhere or in the description.
We have a podcast. We also have just a fun video that we made at the beach talking about the benefits of Ecklonia Cava, so I will link both of those.
Perfect. Then we have Chloroburn, which is at 100 milligrams. It's yielding 12.5 milligrams of 6-paradol, the main bioactive. Then we have Black Ginger. It's in there at 50 milligrams. That's 2.5 milligrams of 5,7-dimethoxyflavone. Then we have Piperine. That's in there at 6 milligrams. That's a very standard bioavailability enhancing dose, but even at that dose, it is also having a nice thermogenic effect. So that's really cool. And then we have Rauwolfine. This is coming from a Rauwolfia vomitoria root extract, which contains 95% Rauwolfine. And as I was saying earlier, it is 0.5 milligram of Rauwolfine. So a very complex formulation. I haven't seen that many really interesting thermogenics. Mostly thermogenics are like really strong stimulating ones. So most thermogenics are quite simple in their overall formulation. They contain a lot of stimulants, and because they contain a lot of stimulants, they do work well, but they're not always the most pleasant products to take, unless you are a stimulant connoisseur, which a lot of you are, clearly, but not everyone likes to be super stimulated all day long. So it's nice to have a low stimulant type of effect. Maybe in the future we will come out with a Cyatherm Enhanced that will just be the craziest thermogenic with a bunch of stimulants in there, and it will be even stronger, and it won't be as nice and balanced as this formulation, of course. But if you really are like a hardcore bodybuilder, you're getting maybe ready for a show, you really need to drop your body fat percentage to extremely low levels, then maybe you need something more extreme, which would then be Cyatherm with enhanced stimulants in there. Or, as I was saying earlier, you could take Cyatherm and then add another stimulant on top of it. Maybe a little bit of extra Rauwolfine, a bit of extra caffeine. We were considering putting caffeine in here too, but a lot of us are already consuming caffeine, so do we really want even more caffeine in our products, or can we just have this product, no caffeine, and then just assume that people might drink a cup of coffee with it, might have an energy drink with it? And that's maybe one of the ways I would recommend using this product. Take it in the morning with a cup of coffee or a caffeinated beverage, and that's really going to set you up for a nice day of very pleasant stimulation and thermogenesis and a really nice mood boost. I think that's the one thing I really like about Cyatherm, and I think I can start feeling it a little bit. Like a slight warm, cozy feeling, but then also a little bit more focus, a little bit more stimulation. Yeah.
Interesting.
Are you noticing anything yet?
I'm not noticing a whole lot. Perhaps I feel slightly warmer. I do feel, though, that I noticed the Ecklonia Cava in it. I actually feel a little bit relaxed from this.
Nice.
It could also be just that it's evening time and I'm listening to you and we're sitting on a comfy couch, so that could be it. But I don't feel overstimulated, so it's definitely not quite as intense as I was expecting, just in terms of the stimulation effects. I do feel a subtle warmth, but it's not extreme.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Maybe we'll get a little bit more. But yeah, it's not extreme. You do pretty well with stimulants, though.
Yeah.
But it's definitely nothing crazy. So if you're afraid of stimulants, don't be afraid of this formulation. The reviews on Reddit are also very positive. None of them are mentioning that it's very stimulating or very calming. It's really nice and balanced. So even if you're just looking for a nice mood boosting mood boosting supplement that's also going to keep you warm in the wintertime, you're not even that concerned about losing fat weight, this is actually a really good product. I'm definitely going to be taking more of it this winter. Okay, where do we go from here?
Well, we talked about the ingredients. We talked about brown versus white adipose tissue. We talked about weight loss. We talked about some of the other ingredients in this that we like to take in our daily stack. So let's see. We also mentioned that this would be a really nice product to stack with berberine, because this has the thermogenic side of things, and then berberine has the GLP-1 inhibition, which is going to help with appetite. So those would make a really, really powerful weight loss combo. Yeah, I mean, besides all of that, we've really covered all of the bases.
The basis, but do we want to get into more of the nitty gritty? How it's all stacked?
Sure.
So,
What more do you have? I'm ready for it.
Cool. So there are a couple of different ways in which we can transform white adipose tissue into brown adipose tissue, and there are a couple of different ways in which we can activate brown adipose tissue. And the way in which we designed the formula is that we have a bunch of things that increase brown adipose tissue specifically. One of those is cyanidin 3 glucoside. So cyanidin 3 glucoside is not doing a fantastic job of actually activating brown adipose tissue. So a few people have noticed some like mild warming effects with cyanidin 3 glucoside, but it's nothing crazy. So cyanidin 3 glucoside is very much specialized at converting white adipose tissue to brown adipose tissue, so not activating it. But that's really important in a long-term overview because we want more of those brown adipose tissues that we can then activate. And one of the ways in which cyanidin 3 glucoside is doing this is through quite a unique mechanism. It is upregulating PRDM6, I believe. I'm blanking a little bit on it. No. I got it now. PRDM16. It is one of the major regulators of white to brown adipose tissue conversion, and it works together with PGC1 alpha as well. So the cool thing about cyanidin 3 glucoside is that it does a really good job of upregulating PRDM16, and it does a really good job of upregulating PGC1 alpha, and those together do a really good job of converting white to brown adipose tissue. And another thing cyanidin 3 glucoside is doing is it almost has like an insulin mimetic type of effect. So it can enhance glucose uptake independently of insulin being present, and it can also enhance insulin sensitivity, which really helps enhance the overall process of thermogenesis and just overall metabolic health. So that is one of the reasons cyanidin 3 glucoside is in there. So really to just up the number of brown adipose tissue. Now, for example, when we released black ginger really activates brown adipose tissue, but it's also really cool because it also increases the conversion of white to brown adipose tissue. And the effect that this has had for a lot of people is that black ginger is very warming. I've heard some people on Reddit say that they can't really take it because it's just too warming. So we have cyanidin 3 glucoside increasing brown adipose tissue. Now we're linking that up with another thing that increases brown adipose tissue, but also has the ability to activate it. That's what makes that combination really unique. Now we go into caloriburn, grains of paradise. Grains of paradise, 6-paradol, also does not do a very good job of converting white adipose tissue to brown adipose tissue, but it does an amazing job at activating brown adipose tissue. So going back again, cyanidin 3 glucoside, more brown adipose tissue, black ginger, more adipose tissue, 6-paradol and black ginger, more brown adipose tissue activation, more thermogenesis. So you can kind of see maybe where this is starting to go. Now, Ecklonia cava, same thing. Very good at converting white adipose tissue to brown adipose tissue. Not necessarily that good at activating it, although it does seem to activate it to a low degree. I haven't really heard of anyone talking about Ecklonia cava being particularly thermogenic and heating them up. So the main purpose of that one really is to increase the conversion of white to brown adipose tissue. So then moving on to piperine. One thing piperine is in here for is to enhance the bioavailability of the ingredients that we just talked about. So it's going to help cyanidine 3-glucoside be even better at converting white adipose tissue to brown adipose tissue. It's going to help Ecklonia cava be even better at converting white adipose tissue to brown adipose tissue. And it seems that it's going to help the 6-peridol from caloriburn be even more effective at activating brown adipose tissue. So again, we're just adding on and stacking and just increasing that conversion to brown adipose tissue and then also activating it. And then last but not least, we still have chromium to talk about, but in the sense of thermogenesis, because chromium is not doing a whole lot of thermogenic activity, that's more in there to enhance insulin sensitivity, which does help the system, but really the last piece of the puzzle here is rauwolsine. So we're slowly building up those brown adipose tissues over time, and as there's more brown adipose tissue, that rauwolsine is going to be releasing more and more norepinephrine and epinephrine. And by the way it does this is quite unique. It is an antagonist of the alpha-2 adrenergic receptor. And what happens when you block the alpha-2 adrenergic receptor, then more epinephrine and norepinephrine gets released. And as I was saying earlier, brown adipose tissue has a very high expression of beta-3 adrenergic receptors. And when norepinephrine and epinephrine bind to the beta-3 adrenergic receptor, the brown adipose tissue gets activated and it starts burning fat and you have a thermogenic effect. So again, all of the ingredients are really building up the level of brown adipose tissue, restructuring your metabolism essentially, and then the rauwolsine is coming in there and kind of putting the cherry on top and pushing all of their buttons and activating them, and voila, we get thermogenesis. So when you first take Cyatherm, like Erica, you haven't taken it in a long time, you're feeling a little bit warm, you were saying, so you have an immediate thermogenic effect. And I guess Erica is a unique situation because you've been taking cyanidine 3-glucoside for a long time, so you already have a lot of brown adipose tissue. But you will get that instant activation of brown adipose tissue and an instant thermogenic effect, but then over time that thermogenic effect is going to get stronger because you will be converting more of that white adipose tissue to brown adipose tissue, and that is really the trick here. Another thing that's happening here is that PPAR alpha and gamma are being activated. Those are also really important regulators of this process. So one thing I haven't talked about yet is that how do you activate brown adipose tissue? And one really important thing I've left out of all of this is that brown adipose tissue has a lot of mitochondria, and in those mitochondria you have something called UCP1, uncoupling protein 1. This is also called thermogenin, and thermogenin is normally being blocked by nucleotides like ATP, for example. So if ATP is present on that protein, UCP1, then it's not going to get activated and you will not have thermogenesis. You basically need to knock the ATP or other nucleotides, you need to knock it off UCP1, and then UCP1 can get activated by free fatty acids. And then there's a process called lipolysis. So some of these ingredients, like rauwolsine, like 6-peridol, they also increase lipolysis in white adipose tissue. So lipolysis is the process where more complex fatty acids, triglycerides, are getting broken down into free fatty acids, and these free fatty acids can then actually bind to and activate UCP1. So they are acting as a trigger for UCP1. UCP1 then activates the thermogenesis in the brown adipose tissue. So that's important because a lot of the ingredients here are also upregulating UCP1. So black ginger does that, cyanidine 3-glucoside does that, and that is also part of the brown adipose tissue restructuring. I've kind of oversimplified this. If you want to learn more about it, you can definitely go out there and read some scientific studies. It's a lot more complex than I'm making it out to be, but I want this to be somewhat easily digestible. But UCP1 plays a big role there, and then lipolysis plays a big role in there, which then means free fatty acids, activating it, that's really good. And then because of that lipolysis, you also get a bit of a reduction in white adipose tissue. So those are also working together. I do want to take a quick break. I am feeling quite warm now.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Nice.
Now that I'm moving around a little bit more, I'm definitely feeling quite warm.
Awesome. And I'm feeling a little bit more stimulated. About 10 minutes ago, I was feeling kind of this slump, actually, but now I'm feeling more stimulated and more energetic.
Interesting. Oh, yeah. The reason I mentioned this lipolysis as well in UCP1 is because I was mentioning PPAR. A lot of the ingredients in here are PPAR activators, and PPAR has the distinct function that it increases lipolysis, free fatty acid production as well. And then another thing that does that is AMPK activation. AMPK activation is probably something a lot of you might know from things like hesperidin. It basically mimics being in a more fasted state. It's very popular in the longevity world, but it also plays a major role in thermogenesis. And a lot of the ingredients in here are AMPK activators. So there's a lot of different things working together to make Cyatherm honestly very sophisticated formulation. It's maybe not the most exciting formulation we've done. I think a lot of you are more into things like Uricomax and Systemax, but I think from really a formulation standpoint, seeing what we did here, looking at upregulating brown adipose tissue and then activating it, it's quite novel, and it's probably one of our more advanced formulations. So that's also one of the reasons why we wanted to do a podcast on it, to really highlight that. And to show off that there's some really unique ingredients in here that are coming together to produce a very unique overall effects profile. So from mood enhancement to metabolic enhancement, so that's where the chromium comes in at the end. It helps with insulin sensitivity. That's obviously going to be good in this scenario as well. If you have insulin resistance, it actually appears that some brown adipose tissue can convert back to white adipose tissue. This is also where a lot of these metabolic disorders are coming from. You know, a lot of people are going out and eating very high fat and high sugar meals and drinking soda all day long, and it dysregulates everything, and then you get insulin resistance, which in the worst case, of course, can lead to diabetes, but in a lesser worst case can actually cause brown adipose tissue to convert into white adipose tissue, which is then going to be stored. You're going to be gaining body weight. Undesirable. So that is one of the reasons why we put chromium in there, to help along with the sanidin 3 glucoside for overall glucose balancing and this overall nutrient partitioning effect. Is there anything else I want to touch on? One other thing. So rauwolsine and other adrenergic stimulants have the distinct unfortunate effect that they can have a vasoconstrictive effect. So that is also one of the reasons why, if you have a cold and your sinuses are stuffy, that you then take pseudoephedrine. Pseudoephedrine, very similar to ephedrine, bit of a smoother overall effect though, but pseudoephedrine, because it increases epinephrine and norepinephrine levels, causes a vasoconstrictive effect, and that vasoconstrictive effect in your nose then causes less mucus to be produced, and then it clears you up. A lot of the nasal sprays work in a very similar way. They cause localized vasoconstriction. So that can be a positive, but in the long term, that's not necessarily desirable, and also probably contributes to some of the uncomfortable physical side effects of some of these adrenergic stimulants. But the cool thing that we built in here with black ginger is that black ginger acts as a pretty powerful PDE5 inhibitor, which then increases cGMP levels, and when cGMP levels go up, then your blood vessels dilate.
I was thinking for muscle building and just for the sake of fitness, having something which is vasoconstrictive would not be good, because we want to increase blood flow.
Exactly.
But that makes sense that the black ginger is then balancing it out in there.
So that's balancing it out.
Nice.
Again, the rauwolsine dose is so low, it's probably not having a very significant vasoconstrictive effect. In fact, I can kind of attest to that. Well, I guess I can't, because the black ginger is in here, but as you can maybe hear, I'm rocking a bit of a cold or something, and every once in a while we've had to stop for a bit of a coughing fit and to clear my nose. Maybe I can breathe like a little bit more easier, but the thing here, of course, what we're talking about is that because of that PDE5 inhibition, we are offsetting that. So I
which is
shouldn't
coming
be
from black ginger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's coming from black ginger. Am I missing anything else?
That's quite thorough, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of you were commenting recently that you wanted a little bit more in-depth on the mechanisms. Not everyone who listens to these podcasts can necessarily understand when I go super in-depth. I think Erica is a really good barometer for that. She's quite knowledgeable about this stuff after doing the podcast for so many years.
But I am not a researcher, and I don't do research in any form like Emil does. So for me, what I learn and what I know is what I've learned from the podcast and also what I've learned from just taking Nootropics Depot supplements myself. But those are pretty much the only supplements I take. I don't take supplements from other brands, and I don't do independent research, and I'm not reading articles about this stuff. So if something goes over my head, it will probably go over the head of most average people.
Right. So Erica's a really good barometer. They've been asking you a lot, like, was that too complex? Should it be more complex? And I think generally we've kind of been building down the overall complexity. Clearly, some of you are missing that, so I want to build it in a little bit more. Maybe keep it more towards the end of the podcast so that the people who aren't necessarily as interested in the nitty-gritty of the mechanisms of action, they can skip the last part, and I can build in a little bit more nerdy scientific stuff, like that PDRM16 mechanism. That's very unique, and definitely look into that if you're interested, because cyanidin 3-glucoside is one of the more powerful natural inducers of PRDM16. I found that very unique. It's actually an effect that I had missed before we started formulating Cyatherm, and then when we were formulating it, it's something I came across, and I thought, it makes sense that cyanidin 3-glucoside is really the base here, because it is probably one of the more effective ingredients at actually increasing the conversion of white to brown adipose tissue. And then all we needed to do beyond that was to activate that brown adipose tissue, which cyanidin 3-glucoside doesn't necessarily do on its own. And I think with that...
Yeah, that brings us to the end of this podcast. This podcast feels particularly short because our last month's podcast was longer than 2 hours, which was really intense and really fun, and we talked about 50 different products. So this feels like a breeze compared to last month. But it's really interesting to learn about this, and also I had no idea that all of those other ingredients were in this stack. So now that I have a better picture of what's actually in it, I can do a little bit more informed bioassaying in terms of just feeling the effects and, attributing maybe that relaxing feeling to the Ecklonia Cava or the uplifting mood feeling to the black ginger. So it's really cool now to just know exactly what's in it, and also to know a little bit more about white and brown fat tissue and how this actually works, and that one just converts to the other and they can go back. As the podcast host, and for those of you who wanted a little bit more in-depth information, I would love to hear your feedback. Was this in-depth enough? Do you want even more? And then my other suggestion is, if you're really curious to learn more and you want all that nitty-gritty info, go back through the catalog and listen to the podcasts again. Go through the chapters and check out those specific areas that you're interested in, because we've literally got hundreds of hours of podcast material, and especially in the first and the second year, those podcasts are like 2-3 hours long. Those ones are really intense and packed full of information. And one reason that I've been able to learn as much as I have throughout the years is a lot of the things that we talk about, we just repeat every single month on almost every single podcast. It took me a long time to learn what ATP was until I heard it enough times and it was repeated enough times that now I understand how it works. And similar thing with the GLP-1 inhibition, and also with PDE5 stimulation, these kinds of things. It takes
opposite PDE5 inhibition, GLP-1 stimulation.
And I still make mistakes. So it takes repetition, and if you want to add that repetition, just go back and listen to the podcast catalog. Because it's there and you can listen to it whenever you want. So with that in mind, this is the end of the podcast. Thank you so much for listening. And if you're not already a part of our subreddit, go subscribe r/Nootropics Depot. There you can ask lots of questions, read other people's questions and discussions about Cyatherm and other products from Nootropics Depot. And definitely subscribe on YouTube and listen on your favorite streaming platform. If you thought this was interesting, share it with your friends. And we're curious what you guys have found from Cyatherm. Have you taken it yet? What are your results so far? Let us know in the comments. Thanks again, and we'll see you next month for a new podcast episode, probably a new ingredient, and more research.
Maybe a new ingredient. Let's see.
Let's see.
We are... One reason why we haven't released a lot of new products recently is because we are going to be completely revamping our bottles. I think Paul has already posted some images of the new bottle design, but because we basically can't be releasing new products in the old packaging before we switch some of the older things to the new packaging, we're taking a little bit of a break from releasing new products, because if we release a new product, we want to release it in a new packaging. I think the new packaging looks fantastic. A lot of you are really going to like it. A lot of the feedback we've gotten over the years is like, hey, I really like your brand, but I feel a little bit embarrassed sometimes when I give it to my friends and family as a gift, because the designs are a bit amateurish, they have funny jokes on them, and that just doesn't make it look like a serious product. And that was never really our intention. We wanted to be nice and casual with it and add a little bit of our personal flair and some jokes on the bottles, especially the Mushroom Magic matchas or the Mushroom Magic drinks. I mean, even the name is kind of funny. And then the stuff that we had on there, like I think one of them said, like, throw that other stuff straight in the trash. Some of you didn't like that. Understandable. So we are completely revamping everything. It's going to look very professional, really nice bottles, more of that like matte black and matte white kind of looks, really
super sleek
clean,
and modern.
sleek. Yeah. So, but anyways, that's why there's been a bit of a drought in new products, which on the one hand sucks. That's the one thing I really love doing.
On the other hand, there's a catalog of more than 500 products to choose from. And again, you should check out that 50th episode, because there's 50 that are really, really well loved by our Nootropics Depot community that you have to choose from and are probably going to be a nice addition to your stack. And then there will definitely be new products down the line.
We have a lot in the pipeline.
Okay, so by the time this video is posted, Black Friday has already happened. So I'm also curious, if you are participating in the sale, what did you buy on Black Friday? I also would like to know in the comments. So let us know. And with that, we will say goodbye for now and see you next month.
See ya.